Hello dear ones. I'm recording this for you on the walk that is my way home from dropping my son at school. And I'm recording it in the liminal space between the town and the wild in a way. There's a little patch of woodland that is right next to the PRU unit, the pupil referral unit, the place where the wild children go. So if there's background sounds, you might be able to hear traffic, and you might be able to hear rain because it's softly raining and I'm under the trees in the little patch of woodland. This recording is in response to one of you asking me about my path. And my path is not... I've been to lots of pagan moots and other kinds of moots, and people have said to me, what's your path? And I know that what they want me to say is something like, I'm a Wiccan who worships Herne the Hunter, or I'm a worshipper of Diana, or something like that. And that is not something that I can say about my path. My path has been intuited. But what I would like to do here is invite us all to create what I've heard called a wisdom pot. And what a wisdom pot is that everyone puts their own insights into the pot so that other people can take things out. And the way that works is we all speak our own truth, we all put it into the pot, and it's information food for other people. So I invite any of you to comment on this audio if you feel inclined to, with another audio, if that's possible. I'm not sure if that's possible on Patreon, or with just your own short or long, if you like, words about your own path. So, if I think back, where did it begin? If I think far enough back, I remember creating ceremonies for dead ladybirds and burying them in little graves surrounded by flowers. I remember doing that at 7 years old. I remember taking bumblebees that were injured and making them temple houses from leaves and grasses in the hopes that it would heal them. One day, bumblebee I did manage to heal in my little plastic wheelbarrow. That's the beginning. And maybe that's the beginning for all of us, I don't know. But I think that my path is deeply connected to the ancient forms of spirituality, and that's why I have such a deep fascination with the Paleolithic, with the cave paintings, with the old goddess figures. My parents are Christian, very deeply Christian, and when I was younger they were this very annoying kind of Christian that thought they were right about everything but actually really didn't know their religion in much depth. And I was the irritating questioner, irritating to my mum especially. My dad was a bit more philosophical and would talk to me, but now my mum is an ordained priest, so they went through a process where my questioning troubled them and bothered them. Not my dad as much as my mum, as I've said, but it troubled them and it bothered them. But then when I left home and I was 18, and then through to my early 20s, my parents started studying their religion properly. They started doing Bible study, they did degrees in theology, and they became people that I could actually talk to about religion. And that has actually really informed my sense. It gave me the freedom to discuss, and that was really important to me. But let's rewind a little bit. So just after I had left home, I had this strange sense of the numinous. I had this sense that there was something under, through, in the earth. You know, there was something numinous. I had a real sense of it, but I was so unsure as to whether that sense of the numinous came from my parents because they were so Christian and they would tell me repeatedly about God. My mum's sense of God when I was younger was like this kind of karmic God, like you were naughty, that's why you fell over and hurt yourself. It's not her sense of God now, she has a much deeper understanding, but that was my sense of God. And so my relationship to the numinous was strange, and I needed to separate out from what my parents had taught me. And maybe we all need to do that regardless of whether they're the same, ultimately they're going to be the same spiritual beliefs as us or not. So I went through that process, and I was left in a limbo with nothing, no sense of the numinous at all, just a feeling and no names for it. I went to university, I did a degree in art, contemporary art. My mind was completely blown open by a sense of what art is. And that was a place where I began to find out about trance states. And I realised, I've always danced. I've always had a very, very close relationship with my body. And my mum used to say to me, you're going to come through that ceiling in a minute, because I was dancing wildly in my bedroom all the time. And the reason I danced was it gave me such joy in my body. It gave me such a deep sense of joy and uplifting. And this was something that deepened when I was at university, because I was doing a contemporary arts degree, and many of the modules that I chose were all performance based, and I did a lot of dancing. Most prominently, I remember as a first year doing a dance piece for a third year, because you were encouraged to do that, to work with the people who were further along in the degree. And I did this piece where there were a whole grid of us dancing in very similar clothes, and it was incredibly slow. There was a very, very slow heartbeat, and every 8 beats we took on a different posture. The postures were very strange. If you've ever seen Butoh, they had a Butoh kind of feeling about them. And in that incredibly slow movement, I went into a trance state, and we were supposed to look as if we were slightly mad, but in a peaceful state of madness. I know that sounds strange, almost oxymoronic, but that's what it was. And after the performance, I had a very interesting feeling inside my body. And that was the beginning of coming to a deeper understanding of what trance state is. I became very, very fascinated by trance state, and I started reading about shamanism and trance states. Not modern Western shamanism. I prefer to read study books that are about the traditional shamans from their lands. And I became very fascinated by the connection between performative art and shamanism, because there's a connection between pretending to be something and becoming that something. And you can see it in tribal dances. When they put on masks and they dance in a particular way, they dance repeatedly, they dance all night, they're chanting, they're singing, they're beating their feet on the ground. They are becoming their animal. And that's a way that shamans heal. They trance, they sing, they go into the other worlds and bring things back. And a lot of that is done with chanting and singing, and those are to induce trance states. So that's why I became very interested in that. Fast forward another few years, I'm still reading, and I come across the book Women Who Run With Wolves, completely moved by... Because I've also always been fascinated in psychology. When I was at university, my final piece was concerned with Jung and the findings of Jung and connections to dreams and art therapy and well-being. My final performance was deeply connected with that. Fast forward a bit, I've left university. I've been working. I had been a carer for people with learning disabilities and people with mental health problems for years, and I was bringing art into all the settings that I was working in. And then I found the book, as I was saying, Women Who Run With Wolves. Her understanding of the psychological elements of how to perceive and use myth and fairy story blew my mind wide open. I was struggling at that point in my relationship. I was struggling with my sense of spirituality, and she reminded me how important it is to be connected to our medial nature, especially as women, to be connected to the spirit side of ourselves. So that had a very deep influence on me. A few years later, once I was settled here in Totnes, I began doing storytellings that were connected to those stories, and then doing discussions afterwards. This was my magic. This was my way of interacting with the numinous, because stories for me contain the essence of what is other, what is sacred, what is spirit. So I wanted I was already performing poetry and telling, and so I wove that in with my storytelling and working with musicians and other poets to make those performances into a magical experience that the audience would come into, be touched by the story, because stories go under our conscious thinking and reach our souls. And so to me that is a very special kind of magic that I love to share with other people, and then to discuss and open it up is, a deepening. They reach through to your heart, and then you can discuss them with your head, and then you're sharing ideas. Again, wisdom pot. So I was still storytelling the story of Skeleton Woman when I was 8 months pregnant with my son. My son was not an easy baby. He was awake in the night a lot. I was very, very tired, very, very worn thin, and I'd had an emergency cesarean, which was much higher than normal cesareans. It took me a very long time to recover from the cesarean, and my son is he's still a wildfire kid who's either intensely awake or intensely asleep. So what that meant was my brain, my capacity for memorizing completely disappeared. I joke sometimes that I felt like my brain was coming out of my breast as breast milk. I breastfed for 2 years, and a lot of my brain came out of my body in breast milk. But something else happened, and I became grounded back in my body. There's something about lack of sleep that puts you into trance state. Not necessarily a healthy trance state that I was in. It can be, and quite a lot of people use lack of sleep or lack of food to get into that kind of altered state so that they can access spirit. It's not my chosen way, but I know that people do it. So I was in a very, very strange state. So what happened then was, I recalled another thing that I've been doing since I was little. I'd always been fascinated with little beads, lovely colours, precious materials, and I remember making little pieces of jewellery from broken pieces of jewellery when I was little as well, the same time as I was making graves for ladybirds and healing temples for bumblebees. So I came back to that because I could words, logos, what some people might term the more masculine side of using words, using reason, and then combining it with the feminine and the intuitive to make poetry. I just couldn't memorize, and I did not want to go on stage. I did perform at one point when Lice was a little baby, and it was awful. I really struggled with it. I struggled to say the poems I'd memorized, but I also did not want to be on stage. I did not want to be in front of people. And so I came to the materials, and I sank into colour and shape and visual symbolism. And that's when, and I was like, I'm interested in colour and feel, because I'm so grounded in my body. I have my baby close to me. I'm deeply in my body in this different way. And I really want to absorb myself in this, but I do not want to be a contributor to the piles and piles of rubbish that are piling up in our world that we do not need. I do not want to make things just so people will buy it, fancy it for a year and throw it away. I want to make things that will last, things that people will keep. And I thought about all the things that I have, that I keep, that are precious to me, and it's to do with the materials and the meaning. And that's when I started making talismanic magic. And all of this time, I'm still reading mythology, I'm still reading about symbolism, and all this time, alongside all of this, my experience of nature is as it was when I was little. I can feel the life in trees, I can feel the life in the ground. I had some experiences on hallucinogenic drugs that just let me feel the teeming of all the bugs and beetles and worms underneath the ground, and the moving of water and nutrients through trees. The world was alive to me all of this time, and it never stopped being alive to me. And in that sense, I know the words now that I would be called an animist, and that some people will call the way that I work, because I choose to journey, shamanic, if you want words. But that's my story in brief. That's a 15-minute talk. That's my story in brief of how I came to be where I am. And I have not had any official training, although now I have just joined the Red Moon Mystery School, which is organised by Nakaya Seeds, and I will be going through a process with her. And what I really enjoy about what she is offering is that she's respecting people for the wisdom of where they are and the place where they are, and not thinking I'm the teacher and I know everything and you absolutely nothing. And that's actually one of the reasons why I've not joined any school before or done any, official training, because I wanted to know for myself my own experience of what my experience and my understanding of the numinous, the magical, the gods are. If you have any questions about the nuances of that, I'm very happy to answer them, but there you go. That is my answer as to my path, and how closely for me art, nature, people, psychology, mythology all weave together for me to make the beauty of what is. And the reason that my fascination goes as far back as the Paleolithic and the beginning and the cave paintings is because it feels to me like that's the purest form of spirituality we had, when we were totally intuiting everything and there was nothing written down, there was no dogma. It was something that flourished naturally from the intelligence that was being born in us and the consciousness that was being born in us, next to our really close relationship with nature and with the spirit world. So I'm back home now. I'm back here in the temple studio, and it seems to make sense to explain to you exactly what all of that means for now, what my belief system is now, because that's the story, that's the pathway of how I got to where I am. So the main aspects of where I'm at now are grounded in the body. Having my son brought me from word and logos, which I'd really gone into because I didn't want to create stuff. I didn't want to physically make stuff, although I had a fascination with colour and tone and materials. And I had chosen to go more along the performance path because it required no materials. And yet having my son grounded me back into body and earth in a sense. And this phrase, matter matters, started going around in my head. And I realised that you can't avoid having a relationship with matter, although there are many religions, many aspects of Christianity are based on that spirit is more important than matter. But the fact is, we live in a body, we live on earth. And so to have a relationship with our body and with earth is very obvious to me. And also it's becoming more and more obvious when we realize that we're damaging the earth because of the ideas that we have. So when I say that my spirituality is based in my body, it means that all the time I am trying to listen to the messages of my body and how my body speaks to me. And I also use my body as a way of spell working. There's always a lot of dancing, and there's also sometimes sexual acts in my magical practice, because state of ecstasy, orgasm is really, really powerful way to send out an energy or to charge your own body. Also, even the states before orgasm, bliss states, ecstasy, they are very, very powerful and very, very magically charged. Dancing and singing are also ways in which I use my body in spell practice. And also, for example, if I'm struggling with something in life, something psychological, I will dance emotions through. And that can sometimes mean putting on really aggressive music when I feel aggressive or angry, but it can also mean putting on something really, really relaxing when I'm feeling in that state. It depends what's right, and I really have to feel into it. So in that sense, I use my body to help me move through psychological states, and I use my body in magical practice. And I also listen to my body to intuit where things are going and what I should do about some things. So dancing is a major part of that for me, and singing. Also, there's the obvious thing of being, as a woman, being in touch with my cycles, listening to my bleeding, and that has changed like since I had my son, and there's been a lot of shifts. As I said, I had a cesarean that affected my body. So one aspect is to really honour my blood and honour my bleeding time, and being a self-employed artist makes that much, much easier. So then another main aspect of my belief system is in connecting with nature and recognizing myself as part of nature, my body. That's another way that matter matters, is I am actually part of everything around me, everything else that is living, and more things are living than we sometimes give credit for. There is still life in bones, there is life in crystals, all that kind of thing. So you might have seen one of my previous videos where I talk about Megan, and I briefly talk about Ond, which is a Norse word for what many of the ancients recognized and as a web of energy that goes around the earth. It goes into the ground, it comes out of the ground, it goes through all living things, and many cultures personify this energy as a serpent or a snake of some kind, which is why many people theorize that in the Christian religion, the evil dude who tempts Eve is a snake. That's a whole thing to get into, but for now, let's just say it's often personified as a snake. And I enjoy that symbolism, and so I embrace it. But it's important to recognize it is symbolism. There's no actual snake moving around the earth. It's just an undulating, moving, flowing. It's also a net or a web. Net is a very interesting symbolism for it, or web as well. But it's moving and it's alive, so I have connection with that. And because one of my totemic animals myself is snake, that also connects me to that as well, my relationship with snake. I feel like my body is snake. So the undulating, writhing movements of dancing connect me with the undulating and writhing movements that energy is doing around the earth. So it's another way also to connect in with the earth. Another way in which so nature gives me peace. It gives us all peace, you know. Meditating in nature is a part of my practice, and just being in awe, remembering to be in awe. And I know that there are others of you that follow me here that have the same connection, and that it can take us out of ourselves. Some human problems are so ridiculous, and nature can help us to forget about that when we go out into it. But there's another aspect in that it speaks to us. Spirit speaks to us and communicates with us through that. I was just walking home and I was contemplating my voice and how I would like to do more poetry in my work as an artist, share more poetry. And just then I saw a wren right on the pathway for me, right on the pathway to my home. Flew off into a bush and I was watching it. But wren for me symbolizes a very, very small creature with a really loud voice. Troglodytes, one of the tiniest birds in Britain, one of the loudest as well. And wren has always spoken to me about voice and about speaking out and about clarity. And so that's nature communicating with me. I see this thing when I see it at the right time, and it's a message for me. And it can the same thing can happen. You could look at a tree and suddenly notice a particular rune if you're interested in runes. And in that same way, I'm very interested in dreams, and I take my dreams and my visions very, very seriously and listen to them and have a deep connection with them. Another part of my practice is to have an altar, which you will have seen in my videos, and to have a relationship with altar. Altar to me is a place that is a focus of magic, and my entire studio, I'm lucky to have a studio, and the entire space, things are placed symbolically, objects are placed symbolically. To remind me of certain things, certain elements are combined, and that's how the talismanic magic works for me. And all of my materials come to me in a natural way. I don't, seek them out. So that's another major aspect of my belief system. I do follow the changing of the seasons, because that's another aspect that means a lot to me, is having relationship with the cycles. I do celebrate the Sabbats, but they aren't actually the main thing for me. Actually, just looking outside and seeing what's going on. And because I've been living in this particular house that I live in now for 7 years, nearly 8 years, I've been watching the particular trees around me, the particular animals around me, for long enough to know to see the changes of the seasons in them. And although I mark the Sabbats, I feel definitely that is my relationship with the changing of the cycles much more deeply. Okay, dear ones, I feel I have answered the question of what is my path with nearly 25 minutes of talking. And I invite you again to share what you have experienced and what is your path, because actually the individuality of each of our spiritualities is, I think, the essence and the power of it and the beauty of it. Also finding the points at which we share beliefs with others and discussing the points at which we differ. I think conversations with other spiritual people can be incredibly deepening, and there's something so exquisite about creating ritual with other like-minded people. There's a great value in that. There's a great value in discussion, in sitting in circle and talking about our beliefs.